Support for this program provided by
Hello folks, Chad here, and I want to talk to you a minute about rabbet planes. Now, if you don't have a rabbet plane in your collection, you need to own one, and here's why. Now, in front of me, I have a variety of some hand planes, and some go by different terms. This one is commonly referred to as a shoulder plane. This one is old, and it's commonly called a moving philister. And then, of course, this one is also old, and it's just referred to as a rabbet plane. Now, essentially, all these planes in front of me are rabbet planes. Now, what makes a rabbet plane different from like a normal plane, like a block plane or a smoothing plane? And what does it actually do? Well, let me show you. So let's talk about joints for a second. Now, if you're doing any kind of carcass work, such as cabinets, drawers, even a simple box, well, a very basic joint to make is the butt joint. And what that is, essentially, is two pieces of wood coming together, and you'll either nail or screw through that to join the boards. Now, this is okay for starting out, but it's not really the best joint you want for good furniture. Reason being is, the glue that you put on here for the end grain, well, that's not ideal because the end grain tends to soak the glue into the wood. And second, when you have those nails going through there, well, that's really the only strength that it has. And if you should drop this on the corner, there's a good chance that that's going to rack and wiggle loose. So, a way to improve that and still keep it fairly simple is with a rabbet joint. Now, a rabbet joint is essentially some of that wood removed. And what this allows now is when you place another board in there, you now have created a shoulder for that board. And this helps give it a little bit more strength. You still have the same problem with the glue and the nails, but believe it or not, that little rabbet can add a lot more strength to this joint. Alright, now let's take a look at what the rabbet plane is and how it's different from a regular, like, smoothing plane. I have a small block plane here. And if you take a look at this, the blade is in the middle and the body goes all the way around the blade. So the blade is housed right in the middle of it. However, on a rabbet plane, you'll notice that the blade extends just ever so slightly past the body. And that's what's going to allow us to make that joint. Now, let me show you how I get set up to do it, and we'll actually cut one. The two rabbet planes that I use the most and absolutely love, well, the first one is the Wood River 92 rabbet plane, or as I said, they call it a shoulder plane. And the other one that I like is an oldie but a goodie, the Stanley 78. Now, why do I like these two? Well, for a couple of reasons. One, on the Wood River, the blade is about 3/4 of an inch wide. And if I need a rabbet bigger than that, well, I can switch over to my Stanley 78, where I think this is probably like right around 1.5 inches. Now, a couple of things I want to say about the Stanley 78. This is a great plane that you can find at just about any garage sale or flea market, and it's probably about $10. But there's a couple of things that most people don't realize if they're first introduced to this. You'll notice on this hand plane that there's a blade here, and it looks like there should have been a blade up front. There is not supposed to be. The idea is that you're supposed to move that blade back and forth. If you put it up here, it now becomes a bullnose plane. And this is so you could get closer to the edge, like in a corner or something. sometimes you'll find these planes where this front piece here is broke off. Now, most folks think, well, that's real common because it dropped and it snapped and it broke off. And that could be. But back in the day, like 80, 90, 100 years ago, the carpenters would use these planes out on job sites. And what a lot of them would do is they would take a hammer and bust that off, now turning it into a chisel plane. And they can get right into a tight corner with it. But honestly, I find when you put the blade up here, it doesn't work well. The blade is too far forward from where your hand and the pressure are, and I find it just doesn't really work that great. But it works wonderful with it back here. Okay, so let me now show you how to make a rabbet joint with this hand plane. A scrap piece of wood, I have a bench hook, and a marking gauge. And what I'm going to do is, depending on the size of the rabbet I want to do, I just randomly set this marking gauge. I'm going to score across the fibers here. That now has defined the size or the width of what the rabbet is going to be. Now, lots of times, this particular plane, it originally came with a fence that you could put on the end of this. And that fence would go against the board and would guide it so you have a nice straight edge. But the newer planes don't have that. In this example here, I would have to try and cut it, and it's really hard to control and steer. So here's a neat tip to make that happen. Now, I'm using a flex cut chip carving knife. And although this is used for doing little intricate carvings, I use this chip carving knife all the time, and I think it works great. And this is one example right here where I'll use it. So I've scored that line. I'm going to place that knife in there, and I'm going to score across a couple of times. Now I need to create a trench. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the knife and I start in on this angle, and note where my thumb is. And I'm gripping the knife with these fingers, and with my thumb I'm pulling the knife to me. But I don't want that knife getting too close to my thumb, so now I'll step my thumb away, keep pulling, step it away, and then when I come to the end, I don't keep pulling forward because there's a good chance I could slip and cut myself. So whenever I get to the end, I now turn and push the knife in. And you can see that it removed a nice shaving. What that has done is, on this side of the board where I scored it, it's straight. And on the other side, well, it's now angled. And that's going to give a trench for my rabbet plane to fit in. So now what I'll do is I'll put the rabbet plane in, and I'll have it angled, and I'll make a couple of passes. Now you can see that that is angled down. So what I start doing is, at this point, I start to level off with the plane. I'm now turning it sideways, and I'm cleaning up that actual shoulder on it. And I can just keep doing this and make it as deep as I want. And so you get the idea. How deep you want to go is up to you. It's a good idea. If you have a certain depth, you'll take your marking gauge, put a line here, so you know exactly how far down you want to make your rabbet. So there you are. A simple, easy way to make a rabbet joint, all done with the basic rabbet plane. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, like, subscribe, leave a comment below. And as always, check out our new videos. We have them on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Until next time, go dance now, people.